Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sharee Miller. Bruce and Sharee were both born and raised in Flint, Michigan, a city that was once a thriving hub of the Midwest auto industry, but had since fallen on hard times. Sharee Peck Keithley Miller was born on October 13, 1971, and by her own account, she had a deeply troubled childhood. Without a father figure in her life, Sharee grew up in a trailer with her mother, who struggled with addiction and had a string of unstable relationships with men. These men often abused Sharee, starting when she was just 3 or 4 years old. By the time she was 16, Sharee was on her own, and at 17 she got married, became pregnant, and had a child. However, the marriage didn't last, and she remarried and divorced again. Her second husband, Tribby, was convicted of second-degree child abuse after brutally assaulting his own child, causing multiple skull fractures. Tribby was also accused of abusing Sharee's 6-year-old daughter, but he was acquitted due to lack of evidence. Sharee seemed to have a pattern of attracting the wrong kind of men, always searching for someone who could provide her with financial security and emotional stability. By the time she was 26, Sharee found herself a single mother of 3, working multiple jobs to make ends meet, including a position at a nursing home and selling Mary Kay cosmetics. While she wasn't a conventional beauty, Sharee was charismatic and attractive. In 1997, she took a job as an accountant at B&A Auto Salvage, a company owned by 47-year-old Bruce Miller. At this point, Sharee saw Bruce as the kind of stable, successful partner who could finally provide her with the comfort and security she had always been missing. Bruce Leroy Miller was born on July 26, 1951. In his younger years, he worked at General Motors, a common career path for many Flint residents. After leaving GM, Bruce went on to own and operate an auto junkyard, where he would accept old cars and resell their parts. Bruce had 3 marriages and enjoyed activities such as racing and socializing. He was known for his generosity and openness. Initially, Bruce showed no romantic interest in Sharee Keithley, his new employee, but rather offered her support as a single mother facing difficult circumstances. However, Sharee eventually caught his attention, and despite their 20-year age difference, an office romance blossomed. Bruce was flattered by the attention of a younger woman, and they quickly moved from dating to living together. The couple got married on April 23, 1999, in one of Las Vegas's chapels, just 4 months into their relationship. After the wedding, Sharee and her children moved in with Bruce, providing her with the stability she had long sought. Bruce's brother, Chuck Miller, revealed on the TV show Snapped that Sharee often praised Bruce, saying he was the best thing that had ever happened to her, as he provided her with a normal life and the means to make her happy. Chuck's wife, Judy, added that Bruce was smitten with the young, attractive blonde, whom he considered the perfect wife. While friends voiced concerns about Sharee's excessive spending habits, which went beyond her means, Bruce chose to ignore it. Sharee would later admit that she had been trying to fill a constant void by instantly maxing out her credit cards and spending all the cash she could find. Despite her friends' misgivings, Bruce remained unconcerned about his wife's spending habits. Sharee, a hard worker, had a job as a Mary Kay cosmetic saleswoman, allowing her to sell products to customers at home or while traveling across the country to manage her accounts. In fact, Bruce even bought her a computer to support her work. The turning point came with this purchase. In 1999, Sharee Miller stumbled upon adult chat rooms while using her home computer to research a vacation destination. At the time, social networking didn't exist, and text messaging was not common. Instead, people connected with each other in online chat rooms, some of which were adult in nature and allowed users to flirt anonymously, share fantasies, and engage in virtual romances. According to friends, Bruce was aware of his wife's online flirting, but didn't see it as a problem. He loved his wife, was happily married, and planned to adopt her children. He preferred to trust her rather than letting suspicions overshadow their family life. Sharee soon became comfortable in the virtual world and began regularly logging into chat rooms, sharing her deepest sexual fantasies with strangers under various aliases. Detective Kevin Shanlian, who investigated the murder case, testified that Sharee had at least 25 different aliases. In 2016, Sharee admitted that she was glued to the computer. She explained that Bruce worked at the store and had his own business, so he was often away. Sharee spent hours flirting online, driven by a need to control everything. She obsessively controlled people who trusted her, treating every man and every relationship like a new level in a video game, each one more challenging than the last. Among the men Sharee Miller met online was Jerry Cassidy, who used the pseudonym Rena Dudes. Born on October 6, 1960, in Kansas City, Missouri, Jerry was a married man who raised a son, enjoyed deer hunting with his brothers, and had a dream of becoming an FBI agent while working as a homicide detective. However, when he reported corruption involving falsified records to a coworker, he faced retaliation, was demoted, and eventually forced to resign after 9 years of service. Despite doing the right thing, the experience ended his career. Depression, drinking, and substance abuse followed, which led to the breakdown of his marriage. Later, Jerry got his life back on track, moved to Reno, Nevada, and became a security guard at Harrah's Casino. In his free time, he frequented chat rooms where he met Sharee Miller. Their online correspondence turned passionate, and in July 1999, they met in person in Reno, where Sharee claimed to be attending a Mary Kay convention with a friend. The online romance blossomed into a physical affair, and Jerry thought his life was finally taking a turn for the better. Sharee presented herself as a wealthy businesswoman living with a disabled husband who was seeking a discreet sexual encounter. Jerry believed her, as his friend Carol Slaughter would later recall. At the time, Jerry was at a low point in his life. His marriage had ended, and he was in a new neighborhood with no friends. He became deeply infatuated with Sharee, telling Carol Slaughter that Sharee was exceptional in the bedroom. Throughout the summer and fall, Sharee used her cosmetics business as a front for frequent trips to Reno, where she would secretly meet with Jerry. The two exchanged explicit emails and instant messages, including intimate videos, and even went so far as to rename their online accounts, with Sharee calling herself Jerry's Fool and Jerry calling himself Sharee's Fool. Despite his background as a cop, Jerry seemingly failed to notice any red flags, blinded as he was by Sharee's professions of love. Whether due to naivety, flaws, or emotional vulnerability, Jerry proved to be an easy target for Sharee's manipulation. She quickly wove a web of deceit, convincing him that he needed to kill her husband. The impact on Jerry was evident to those around him. His friends noted that after Sharee entered the picture, he became increasingly erratic, exhibiting symptoms akin to bipolar disorder. He would be overly excited and energetic before her visits, only to plummet into painful depression after she left. As early as September, Sharee claimed to be pregnant with Cassidy's child, sending Jerry fake evidence, including doctored photos, a forged positive pregnancy test, and even fake belly pictures. Shortly after, she feigned that her husband Bruce had discovered her infidelity, beating her and causing her to miscarry. Unbeknownst to Jerry, Sharee had actually undergone a tubal ligation in 1995, rendering her sterile. Jerry had no reason to doubt her lies, and so he believed every word. After losing the baby, Sharee announced that she was pregnant again, this time with twins. Jerry begged her to leave her abusive husband Bruce, take the children, and come live with him. Sharee feared for her life and Jerry's, claiming Bruce had mafia connections and wouldn't let them leave. Despite her fears, Sharee continued to secretly meet Jerry in Reno. During one of these meetings, Jerry was arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct at a casino, which temporarily halted their online communication. After his release, Jerry decided to protect Sharee from further danger by distancing himself from her and returning to Missouri to reconcile with his family. The online relationship continued, with Sharee sending Jerry photos of her ultrasound and growing belly. On November 5, 1999, Jerry received an ominous email, allegedly from Bruce, threatening to prevent the twins' birth. Alarmed, Jerry tried to contact Sharee but received a message from her hours later, saying she had to leave for a few days. The next day, Jerry received a message from Bruce, revealing that he had forced Sharee to have an abortion. The message included disturbing photos of a battered Sharee. Jerry had reached his breaking point. The tragic deaths of his twin children at the hands of Bruce Miller had left him devastated and consumed by anger. He held Bruce responsible not only for the loss of his 3 children, but also for the suffering of the woman he loved. The next day, November 8th, Jerry confided in Sharee, declaring his intention to kill her husband. Together, they began to orchestrate a plan to take his life. They carefully mapped out routes, identified ideal parking spots, and pinpointed the perfect location and time to dispose of the body. Jerry then embarked on the long journey from his home to Michigan. As Bruce prepared to leave work, he received a call from Sharee, following their plan. She asked him to pick up a pizza on his way home, distracting him from the impending danger. Unaware of the threat lurking behind him, Bruce failed to notice Jerry approaching, shotgun in hand, before he pulled the trigger. After committing the crime, Jerry returned home while Sharee set the next part of their plan in motion. She contacted Bruce's brother, Chuck, pretending to be worried about her husband's prolonged absence, and requested that he drive to the junkyard to check on him. When Chuck arrived, he found his brother's lifeless body on the floor, lying in a pool of blood, with a close-range shotgun wound to the chest. Witnesses reported that Sharee reacted with screams and tears upon learning of Bruce's death. The crime scene was promptly discovered, but the perpetrator had left behind no trace or evidence. Investigators found that Bruce typically carried large sums of cash, leading them to initially suspect that his death might have been the result of a botched robbery, since his wallet was missing. Suspicion fell on John Hutchinson, a friend and employee who had recently borrowed $2,000 from Bruce. Police questioned Hutchinson, searched his home, and seized his weapons, but he denied any involvement. Although Hutchinson failed a polygraph test, the investigation proved inconclusive, and he was eventually released. A theory that the murder was committed to falsify vehicle identification numbers was explored, but none of the leads panned out, and the case was eventually closed. In the meantime, Sharee's behavior seemed suspicious to Judy Miller, the sister of Bruce, the victim. Just 2 days after her husband's death, Sharee was seen dancing happily in a bar in Otisville, Michigan. 2 weeks later, she had already started dating a local delivery boy named Jeff Foster, not Jerry Cassidy, her supposed lover. Jerry Cassidy had expected to be with Sharee after the murder, but she started to distance herself from him instead. A month after the murder, Sharee moved her new boyfriend into her house and cut ties with Jerry, leaving him heartbroken. It was likely at this point that Jerry realized he had murdered an innocent man due to Sharee's manipulation, and feelings of guilt overwhelmed him. He transformed from Sharee's lover to an investigator and discovered that all the accusations were fabricated by Sharee herself. On February 11, 2000, Jerry took his own life in his apartment in Odessa, Missouri, using a .22 caliber rifle. His body was discovered in a chair with an open Bible on his lap. The Bible was open to Matthew 5, which contains the passage, "Thou shalt not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be liable to judgment." It seemed that Jerry had judged himself, confessed his guilt, and taken his own life as punishment. Cassidy's mother revealed in an interview a few days after the body was removed that while cleaning the apartment, family members found a briefcase containing 3 suicide notes and an envelope attached to the outside. Jerry's motive was revenge against the woman who had broken his heart. In his confession, the former detective explained that he had killed Bruce Miller because he believed at the time that Bruce had abused Sharee and was responsible for the deaths of his 3 children. However, the letter also revealed that Sharee Miller had lied to Jerry about Bruce's behavior. On February 22, 2000, police arrested Sharee Miller, as she arrived at the airport with her boyfriend, Jeff Foster, after a trip to Reno. She was charged with second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Prosecutors believed that Sharee was a skilled manipulator who had convinced Jerry to kill her husband under false pretenses. Despite the evidence against her, Sharee maintained her innocence to her deceased husband's family. On December 12, 2000, the trial of Sharee Miller began in the state of Michigan, generating widespread national attention due to the unusual nature of the internet-related crime. The public's interest was exceptionally high. The prosecution presented thousands of messages exchanged between Sharee and Jerry, revealing the numerous lies she had told. Sharee claimed she had undergone a fallopian tube ligation years prior, and therefore could not be pregnant with Jerry's children, and that she had never been abused. However, the prosecution alleged that Sharee wanted her husband Bruce dead for financial gain, as a divorce would not have provided her with sufficient money. In contrast, the defense argued that Sharee received only a minimal sum after Bruce's death and would have enjoyed a more affluent lifestyle had she remained married. The defense also suggested that Jerry Cassidy was seeking revenge as a spurned lover and had fabricated evidence against Sharee. Sharee told the jury that her online sexual communications with Jerry were merely a fantasy, and that she had lied about her pregnancy to help him cope with depression and about the abuse to deter him from contacting her. Sharee vehemently denied writing the messages that described the crime, implying that Jerry had forged them using his expertise as a homicide detective. However, the police discovered evidence of the messages on Sharee's computer. The online correspondence played a crucial role in the trial. Miller was convicted on December 22nd, receiving a life sentence for murder and 54 to 81 years for conspiracy. In 2007, while incarcerated, she was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and other mental health issues. Miller began treatment and filed an appeal, even getting married for the fourth time. Michael DeNoia saw Miller's story on the news and was captivated by her charm. He wrote to her, and in 2008, he visited her in prison, proposing during the visit. Although some reports claim they got married in April 2008, there is no evidence to support this. In 2008, Miller's conviction was overturned on appeal, and she was released from prison in 2009. A federal judge ruled that Jerry's suicide letter should not have been considered evidence, as Cassidy was deceased and the defense could not cross-examine him. The judge ordered a new trial and released Miller on bail. In 2012, Sharee was returned to jail to resume serving her original sentence, following a court ruling that re-evaluated the admissibility of the suicide letter. Having spent 3 years outside, Sharee continued to proclaim her innocence. In 2016, Sharee Miller unexpectedly confessed to her role in her husband's death in a 4-page letter to a judge. Many saw this as a bid for sympathy or profit. Sharee wrote that being sent back to prison after 3 years of freedom triggered her admission. She was devastated to leave her daughter and granddaughter behind, and the full weight of her actions hit her. She described her husband as a great man who only loved and wanted to adopt her children, and she was filled with remorse for ordering his killing. Sharee gave a 2022 TV interview, confessing Bruce wasn't mob-connected and didn't abuse her. She faked bruises and ultrasound scans to control Jerry, fearing Bruce would discover her true identity. Sharee knew Jerry's depression and had evidence, but thought she could manipulate the jury. She rejected a 15-year plea bargain, leading to a life sentence. Now incarcerated, Sharee seeks peace, saying it's hard to face her actions. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Mike Williams. Mike Williams was born on October 16, 1969 in Bradfordville, north of Tallahassee. He was the son of a bus driver and a kindergarten teacher. Family and friends called him Mike. Even though the family didn't have much money and Mike, along with his older brother, grew up living in a trailer, those were happy times. The parents cared about their son's future, and instead of building a house, they set aside money for the education of both boys, who themselves worked part-time at night in supermarkets. Mike enrolled in North Florida Christian High School, where he excelled. He became student council president, played soccer, and was active in the Key Club. At the age of 15, Mike started duck hunting as a hobby and met Denise Merrill. Denise was a cheerleader and council secretary, and they began dating. Friends thought they were a great couple. While still in high school, Mike became best friends with Brian Winchester, whom Denise had introduced him to. Brian later had a friend, Katie Thomas, and the two couples remained friends for the rest of Mike's life. After high school, Mike and Denise attended Florida State University, where they both majored in political science and urban planning. The lovers graduated together. Denise became a public accountant, and Mike became a real estate appraiser. Mike proved himself to be a dedicated and hard-working individual, consistently putting in 15-hour days, which led to rapid success in his career. In 1994, he married Denise, and around the same time, his friend Brian married Kathy. The four of them maintained a close and supportive relationship. Mike loved his wife deeply and was determined to provide for their family to the best of his ability. He had boundless energy and was a high achiever. By the age of 31, Mike Williams had achieved significant success as a real estate appraiser, earning a substantial annual income of nearly $200,000. This allowed the couple to purchase a comfortable home in an upscale neighborhood on the east side of town, and in 1999, they welcomed a daughter into their family. Although Mike was prudent, he had a tendency to engage in risky activities, which prompted his friends to warn Denise about them. To ensure his family's financial security, Mike sought the advice of his trusted friend Brian, who worked as an insurance agent. Brian sold Mike 2 life insurance policies, one worth $250,000 and another worth $500, providing financial protection for his loved ones in the event of an unforeseen disaster. In 2000, Mike's father died, which had a profound impact on Mike. To ensure his family's financial security, Mike turned to his friend Brian for help. Brian assisted Mike in getting a $1 million life insurance policy, adding to an existing policy and bringing the total coverage to nearly $2 million, just 6 months before Mike vanished. On December 16, 2000, their 6th wedding anniversary, Mike woke up early to go duck hunting on Lake Seminole, a large reservoir connected to the Apalachicola River. Denise and their daughter stayed at home, expecting Mike to return that day so they could celebrate their anniversary with a planned night out in Apalachicola, a small town on the bayou. However, Mike didn't come back, prompting Denise to become worried and call her father. Her father then contacted Mike's best friend, Brian Winchester. Brian and his father drove to Lake Seminole, where they found Mike's Ford Bronco parked near the boat dock, but Mike was missing. The search for Mike began, and after a few hours, a helicopter pilot located the boat drifting approximately 225 feet away from the boat ramp. Notably, Mike's shotgun was still in its case on board, indicating that he was never able to use it. This discovery led to a shift in the operation from a rescue mission to a recovery effort. Locals familiar with the area informed the search team that the location was previously an orchard, known as Stump Field, due to the numerous stumps both above and below the water level, which made navigating motorized boats through the area hazardous. The search team formulated a theory about what might have happened to Mike. He might have collided with a stump while operating his boat, fallen into the water, and become trapped, with his boots filling with water and ultimately causing him to drown. Several agencies, including a dive team from Montgomery, Alabama, and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, participated in the search for Mike. Although they made an extensive and systematic effort, they did not find any signs of him. After a week, the search operation shifted its focus to a body recovery effort, Search teams used probe poles to scan the lake bottom and brought in dogs to assist. 10 days into the search, volunteers found a camouflage-patterned hunting hat, but it could not be confirmed as belonging to Mike. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency suggested that Mike might have been attacked by alligators, which could explain why his body was never found, given the lake's known alligator population. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement did not find any evidence of a violent death and supported this theory. The search was finally called off after 5 weeks. The day after the authorities gave up searching for Mike, Denise put together a memorial service to pay tribute to him. While it appeared to everyone that Denise had come to terms with losing her husband, Mike's mother was still grappling with the loss. 6 months down the line, in June 2001, a fisherman stumbled upon a sinister find: a pair of boots bobbing on the lake's surface. This prompted a team of divers to scour the lake, and they fished out a lightweight hunting jacket and flashlight from the depths. When they examined the jacket, they found a hunting license with Mike Williams' name and signature tucked away in one of its pockets. The discovery of the hunting jacket and boots raised many questions about Mike Williams' disappearance. The fact that neither item showed signs of an alligator attack and appeared to have been recently placed in the water rather than having been there for 6 months was suspicious. The boots, for example, were not slimy, and the flashlight still worked. Despite these inconsistencies, a week later, Denise's attorney requested that the court declare Mike Williams dead, citing the discovery of his belongings as evidence. The attorney suggested that alligators and other aquatic life had likely consumed his body whole. The court granted the motion, and the death certificate was issued, stating that Mike died on December 16, 2000, due to accidental drowning while duck hunting on Lake Seminole. However, Cheryl Williams, Mike's mother, refused to accept this conclusion and continued to search for her son. Her efforts caused tension with her former sister-in-law, Denise, who demanded that she stop searching and accept reality. Cheryl's persistence eventually led to a strained relationship between the two women, and Denise followed through on her threat. Undeterred, Cheryl spent the next 3 years fighting to have Mike's disappearance investigated. She made numerous phone calls, posted signs, wrote to the governor, compiled a book of evidence, and contacted reporters. Her persistence finally paid off when she convinced an alligator expert, Matthew Oresco, to get involved. Oresco explained that alligators don't feed during the cold winter months, and that there would always be forensic evidence left behind after an alligator kill. After 3 years, Cheryl Williams finally persuaded law enforcement to abandon the alligator attack theory and launch an official investigation into her son Mike's disappearance. The case was reopened based on newly uncovered facts about alligators' eating habits and evidence gathered from interviews and official data. Former investigator Ronnie Austin revealed that the general consensus among law enforcement agencies was that Mike's death was not accidental. Initially, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency took charge of the case, as Mike was considered a missing hunter. They spent 735 hours searching a 10-acre section of the lake for his body, but neglected to explore other possibilities. Subsequent investigations involved interviewing all those involved in the search, including police officer David Arnett, who was present at the scene. He pointed out several suspicious circumstances. Mike rarely hunted alone. His truck was found in an undeveloped area, and the severe storm that night should have pushed the boat to the east shore, yet it was found on the west shore. Furthermore, the boat's motor was not running, despite being full of gasoline. If Mike had fallen out of the boat while driving, it would have continued to float in circles until it ran out of gas. Unfortunately, law enforcement realized too late that they were not dealing with a simple drowning. By then, the crime scene had already been compromised by numerous volunteers and searchers. A car that could have been a vital clue was taken by the family without proper verification, and potential witnesses were overlooked. Denise Williams and Brian Winchester aroused the suspicion of investigators due to their sudden union. The fact that Winchester had divorced his wife Kathy and married Denise raised eyebrows. Further investigation revealed that Denise had received a substantial financial gain of nearly $2 million from her late husband's life insurance policy. Detectives discovered that Winchester was the one who had sold the policy to Mike. It was also peculiar that Denise, as Mike's wife, showed little interest in the investigation and actively tried to hinder Cheryl's efforts, even going so far as to forbid the grandmother from communicating with her granddaughter. When the newlywed couple was brought in for questioning, their statements failed to shed new light on the case. Brian provided an alibi, stating that he was 60 miles from the lake and at home in bed at the time of Mike's disappearance, which his ex-wife Kathy could corroborate. He claimed that he had intended to go hunting with his father-in-law that morning, but overslept. Denise's interrogation also yielded no new leads. In 2008, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement revealed that Mike's disappearance was not accidental, and they suspect he was a victim of a crime. However, due to the lack of sufficient evidence, they are unable to bring charges. Despite this, Cheryl Williams persisted, and her efforts led to the Discovery Cable Channel featuring a story on Mike's disappearance and the subsequent investigations. By that time, Cheryl had become disenchanted with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, convinced that they were either incapable or uninterested in resolving the case. Starting in 2012, Mike's mother, Cheryl, began a campaign to push for a new investigator or special prosecutor in Mike's case. Over 9 years, she wrote a staggering 2,600 letters to Governor Rick Scott, pleading her case. Meanwhile, in 2012, Denise discovered that Brian was cheating on her, and they broke up. The following year, she filed for divorce. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, an appraisal of their former family home was scheduled, which would finally free them from their property disputes. This event marked a turning point in Mike's case. The breakup was acrimonious, with Brian refusing to accept the divorce and Denise refusing to continue the relationship. Their constant fighting was further complicated by the Williams investigation, which seemed to be mocking them. Brian continued to call Denise, but she stopped taking his calls. The stress was taking a toll on him. On August 5, 2016, the day of the scheduled real estate appraisal, Denise left her home to drive to her job at Florida State University. As she chatted with her sister on the phone, she noticed someone climbing into the back seat of her car. To her shock, it was Winchester. Brian, who had been hiding in the back seat, pressed a loaded gun against Denise's ribs and ordered her to drive straight ahead. He claimed he was forced to take this drastic measure because she had stopped answering his calls. Denise attempted to placate Brian by agreeing with everything he said and promising to give him a chance to salvage their marriage. Naively, Brian believed her. Denise reassured him that she wouldn't report the incident to the police, and Brian exited the car, taking with him the brown sheet, plastic sheeting, bleach sprayer, and tools. It became evident that Denise had narrowly escaped death. Denise promptly called emergency services, and Brian was swiftly arrested and charged with kidnapping, a first-degree felony in Florida carrying a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. He was also charged with domestic violence and armed burglary. The court ruled to detain Brian without bail. Cheryl Williams, hopeful that this development would shed light on her son's disappearance case, expressed optimism. Denise told the New York Daily News that she thought Brian was motivated by their wealth and prayed that he would reveal the truth. In a surprising turn of events, Brian cooperated, negotiating a lenient deal with the prosecutor and avoiding a life sentence. Brian began his confession by saying that initially, their marriage was going well, but he was a bad husband. He discovered a note in his first wife Kathy's purse revealing her infidelity, and he sought revenge. They regularly socialized with Denise and Mike, going to bars and concerts together. Brian had known Denise since high school, but it wasn't until his girlfriend Kathy cheated on him that he started viewing Denise in a romantic light. The affair between Brian and Denise started in October 1997. What began as a drunken one-night stand at a rock concert soon turned into frequent secret trysts. They would meet at hotels during the workday whenever possible. Brian didn't want to divorce Kathy, but Denise made it clear she wouldn't leave her husband. She cared deeply about public opinion and didn't want to risk losing custody of her daughter. Over time, their affair evolved beyond casual sex. Denise and Brian saw themselves as a couple, exchanging gifts and love letters. It became apparent they couldn't continue like this. They couldn't bear to be apart. But divorce was off the table for Denise. Her reputation as a pious person had to remain intact. Then, Mike nearly died in a hunting accident, and Brian saved his life. Denise saw an opportunity to escape her predicament. After making a deal with the prosecutor, Brian will disclose that the year 2000 sparked discussions about Mike and Kathy's death. According to Brian, Denise had wanted to deflect responsibility, placing the blame solely on him and not herself. She had preferred a scenario in which their deaths would be viewed as an accident rather than a murder, thereby allowing her to convince herself that their fate was in God's hands, which would enable her to live with the consequences. After considering various options, Brian and Denise chose to stage a boating accident. They planned the murder to coincide with the maximum payout on Mike's life insurance policy, which was set to expire at the end of December 2000. The plan was in place. Brian invited Mike on a hunting trip, claiming he'd found an ideal spot on Lake Semol's shores. Mike thought he'd be back home by noon to celebrate his anniversary with his wife. Brian told him to bring his wading boots, as they were essential for the trip. Unbeknownst to Mike, Brian had a sinister motive. If he fell overboard wearing wading boots, he'd supposedly drown quickly. The plan was to make Mike's death appear as an accidental drowning. Once they were in the water, Brian pushed Mike out of the boat. However, Mike grabbed onto nearby stumps and started wading through the water towards the shore. Brian panicked, not knowing how to react. Mike began shouting for help, and Brian, desperate and confused, grabbed a shotgun and shot Mike in the head without thinking of the consequences. Brian's plan had unraveled, and he had to cover his tracks. Time was running out. He should have been home by now, getting ready to go hunting with his father-in-law. Since no one knew he was at the lake with Mike, Brian decided to drive home and pretend he'd overslept. He hoped Kathy would still be asleep. Brian entered the house as quietly as possible. Kathy was asleep, and his phone was on the floor. He went to bed, then called his father-in-law to apologize. Next, Brian created an alibi for himself before hiding the body. Denise was unaware that Brian had shot Mike in the head and buried him. Brian tried to confess, but Denise didn't want to hear it. For her, it was enough that her husband was gone. She preferred to believe that God had prevented Mike from swimming out and let him drown, as Brian had suggested. They promised each other to keep the secret. Denise and Brian rationalized the killing, claiming that Mike's presence made it impossible for them to live together. They downplayed the role of money, saying it was just an added bonus. Brian testified in court that investigators had discovered he had planted a hat, boots, flashlight, and license as part of a ruse. His aim was twofold. First, to deter searchers from abandoning the lake, and later, to provide justification for declaring Mike dead, thereby allowing Denise to collect insurance benefits. Impressively, they managed to expedite the typically 5-year recognition process to just 7 months, securing not only Social Security benefits, but also other advantages. As a result, Denise received approximately $2 million on May 8, 2018. Denise Williams faced charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and being an accessory to a felony, all of which carried a life sentence. Despite pleading not guilty to all 3 charges, Denise was sentenced to life imprisonment in February 2019. 5 months later, Mike and Denise's daughter Ansley inherited all of her late father's assets and the insurance money that had been owed to Denise. Denise Williams appealed her conviction and life sentence. Her attorney argued before Florida's First District Court of Appeal that there was no evidence to implicate her in the actual murder. In November 2020, the murder conviction was overturned, although the 30-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder was upheld. Denise is currently being held at the Florida Women's Reception Center and will be 78 years old upon her release. Brian Winchester is currently serving the remainder of his sentence at Madison Correctional Institute in Florida, with a scheduled release date of July 30th, 2036, at which point he will be 67 years old. Ansley, the daughter of Mike and Denise, firmly believes her mother is innocent and attributes responsibility to Brian Winchester. While refusing to discuss the case or her personal life with the media, Ansley remains estranged from her uncle, Nick, and grandmother, Cheryl, who are distressed by their inability to connect with her. Cheryl deeply regrets having lost both her son and her granddaughter. The case of Carjan Oviedo. Rolando Angel Aquino was a charismatic individual who naturally drew people's attention. One day he caught the captivating gaze of Carjan Oviedo, a woman with a fiery passion for life and an infectious energy. They instantly connected, sharing similar interests and dreams, as well as a strong determination and entrepreneurial drive. This chance encounter led to a beautiful relationship that brought them true happiness. In 2016, the couple took the next step, moving in together and launching their own business, a warehouse, in their home. Carjan's keen eye for detail shone as she created a welcoming sign on one of the windows for customer service, alongside lists of items for sale. This was their pride and joy, a small but thriving venture. The people of Mañata watched this happy and driven couple with admiration and curiosity, wondering who they were and how they achieved so much. While many knew Carjan from her childhood, Rolando remained an enigma, with his past in Bolivia remaining a mystery to all. Rolando not only co-ran the business with Carjan, but he also worked at the Galeen Fair, where wholesale fruit sales took place. From the outside, it seemed like they had found their perfect life together, but even the strongest relationships can be put to the test. One day, Rolando was shocked to find Carjan in the car with another man. His initial reaction was anger, and in that moment, he almost destroyed the car's interior. Their picture-perfect relationship crumbled in a matter of minutes. However, Rolando decided to forgive and continue their relationship, choosing to move forward with the one he loved. To outsiders, they still appeared to be the ideal couple, capable of overcoming any obstacle together. Rolando Angel Aquino, born in 1987 in Bolivia, is an enigmatic figure. The exact date of his arrival in Argentina remains unknown, like many other aspects of his life. As the eldest of 7 children, Rolando learned the importance of family bonds and hard work from a young age. He dreamed of a happy family filled with joy and laughter. In his youth, he met Carolina Chavez, with whom he had a son. Despite their difficulties, the couple remained on good terms. Later in life, Rolando had a second son, Elias, with Soledad Guardio. Although his relationships with Soledad didn't work out, Rolando remained a devoted and caring father to his children. He maintained a warm relationship with the mothers of his children and stayed in touch with them. Rolando was a physically fit man who prioritized his health from a young age. He played sports and soccer for the local team to stay active. His colleagues and loved ones described him as kind, hardworking, and sociable. Although he got along well with his neighbors, Rolando had a unique charm when it came to socializing. Carjan was born on March 30th, 1990, and grew up in Monado, where she and Rolando later set up their warehouse. The locals knew her as an outgoing and open-minded woman. Like Rolando, Carjan longed for a happy and successful family life with a loving and devoted partner. However, it took her some time to find the right person to build her happiness with. Carjan had 2 daughters from previous relationships before meeting Rolando. One of her former partners, Rule OA, was the father of one of the girls, and she married him in 2013. However, their marriage was troubled and eventually headed for a breakdown. Rule claimed that financial struggles were one of the main reasons for their conflicts. Feeling anxious about his life and seeking better opportunities, Rule left his family under the pretense of buying something essential, fleeing the city and moving abroad to avoid being traced. By the summer of 2019, 9-year-old Elias was living with Rolando and Karjan. They had made plans to spend quality time together in the coming months. However, on the morning of July 12, 2019, Rolando found Elias unwell when he went to wish him good morning before leaving for work. Concerned, Rolando took Elias to the children's hospital to see a pediatrician. After an examination, the doctors determined that Elias's condition was critical, and he was rushed to the intensive care unit. Despite the best efforts of the medical staff, Elias tragically passed away shortly after arriving at the hospital. The remarkable thing about Elias's death was that he had been in perfect health when he left home, showing no unusual symptoms, and seemed equally well when he arrived at his father's house. However, the medical report was shocking. It revealed that Elias had died from severe poisoning, which caused his organs to fail and a blood clot in his brain. This news left Elias's parents stunned, as they could not understand how their active and healthy son could have suddenly died from such a mysterious illness. As part of their professional duty, the doctors recommended further forensic investigation. However, Elias's mother and grandmother were too grief-stricken to consider this, and they refused. The funeral home Karjan suggested cremating the body, but Elias's mother declined, preferring to bury her son in a private cemetery where she could visit his grave and lay flowers. Elias's sudden death shattered Rolando's heart, leaving him devastated by the loss of his youngest son. Karjan, who was caring and loving, stood by him every step of the way, never leaving his side. She took charge of all their business affairs, providing him with gentle support and helping him navigate his pain and grief. As time passed, the warmth and love from the woman he cherished gradually eased his suffering. 16 months after the tragedy, Rolando took a major step and proposed to Karjan, and they got married, with Rolando convinced she'd always be by his side. However, their happiness was short-lived. On February 6, 2022, Karjan returned home from a beauty salon and gym visit, and the next day, February 7th, she noticed Rolando was experiencing serious health issues. A medical ambulance was called to their home as Rolando, 35, suddenly felt very ill after vomiting profusely and collapsed in their living room. The housekeeper called for emergency medical help. At the Santa Maria clinic, doctors allowed Karjan to see her husband, but his condition was critical. Despite the medical staff's efforts, Rolando passed away on February 9th. The cause of death was severe poisoning, which raised questions among the medical staff, given Rolando was a healthy and active sportsman. Rolando's wife, Karjan, revealed that he was taking medication to treat dark skin spots. However, this information raised red flags among specialists. Upon further investigation, tests disclosed an abnormal amount of calcium oxalate crystals in Rolando's system, a telling sign of ethylene glycol poisoning, a key ingredient in car antifreeze. The sudden and mysterious death of Rolando sparked a high-priority investigation by the authorities. The prosecutor's office launched a thorough inquiry into the neighborhood where the Aquino couple resided. Neighbors became crucial witnesses, reporting that Karjan had frequently administered her husband unknown medication. They knew she used these drugs to attend a party without her husband. Nevertheless, neighbors also expressed concerns about Rolando's son, leading investigators to consider the possibility that Karjan intended to sedate her husband temporarily rather than kill him. The Technology Crimes Unit officers' findings completely dismissed the idea that Rolando's death was accidental. They requested forensic examinations and questioned Karjan, Rolando's wife, thoroughly. However, during the interrogation, Karjan's responses were contradictory. The officers asked her to identify the substance she had given her husband before he died, and she claimed it was a skin blemish remedy that she had administered through an IV. When they asked her to produce a vial of the solution, Karjan said the housekeeper, Claudia Cortez, had already thrown it away. But when the officers interviewed Claudia, she denied Karjan's statement about the discarded vial. Claudia also revealed that she had overheard a conversation between the couple in which Rolando expressed dissatisfaction with his medication. Karjan was detained, and her cell phone was seized as part of the investigation. The news of Rolando's death shocked his family, friends, and teammates. Those who regularly visited the Aquino couple's warehouse and other locals were also stunned. Everyone struggled to understand what had happened and why the family's father had died so suddenly. Rolando's ex-husband was shocked when rumors started circulating that Karjan had deliberately poisoned him. The ex-husband described Karjan as always being affectionate and never violent towards him. However, an investigation into Karjan's phone revealed that she had searched online for information on the most deadly poisons and ways to erase her search history. Furthermore, records showed that she had ordered ethylene glycol twice from an online store. According to the Agency for Toxic Substances and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, ethylene glycol is a synthetic substance used in antifreeze production, which is odorless, has a sweet taste, and is extremely toxic to humans. Based on forensic evidence and other clues, the prosecutor's office accused Karjan of intentionally poisoning Rolando by mixing the substance with orange juice, which severely damaged his health and ultimately led to his death. A series of strange and tragic events in the Aquino family prompted the authorities to take drastic action. Suspicions arose over the cause of 9-year-old Elias's death, leading to a new investigation. The prosecutor's office launched a detailed probe into the boy's medical history. According to his mother, Elias was healthy and active until he suddenly slipped into a coma at his father's house, never to recover. However, the death certificate stated that the cause was a malfunction of his internal systems and cerebral thrombosis. Investigators doubted that a healthy 9-year-old could have died from such causes. The prosecutor's office requested information on possible ethylene glycol purchases and received a response confirming that Karjan had bought the poison on July 2, 2019, shortly before Elias arrived at the Aquino home. Relatives also confirmed that Karjan insisted on cremating Elias's body, but the birth mother refused, preferring to bury her son. The gathered evidence was sufficient for prosecutor Claudia Rios to file new aggravated murder charges against Karjan on March 4th, related to Elias's poisoning. On March 14th, a judge ordered Karjan's pretrial detention, which she tried to appeal, but the judge rejected, ruling that she should remain in custody until the trial began. The highly anticipated trial commenced on November 28, 2022, at the Mendoza Criminal Court, drawing widespread public and media interest. 2 pending indictments were being addressed, one led by prosecutor Fernando Guzzo, focusing on the murder of Elias, and the other involving Claudia Rios, related to the murder of Rolando. Karjan's defense team sought to counter the charges, claiming that Rolando had a history of violence and abuse, and that there was insufficient reliable evidence to support the allegations. They emphasized that Karjan lacked a motive for the murders, pointing out that she was the sole owner of the house, cars, and business. The defense also argued that the charges against Karjan were unfounded and suggested that her partner might have purchased antifreeze by hacking into her account. Additionally, Karjan claimed to have an alibi for February 6th, the day her husband was poisoned, as she was not at home when he began experiencing health problems. After the initial phase of the trial, the defendant, dubbed the Gumalan poisoner by the media, was given the opportunity to speak. Emotionally, Karjan denied committing the heinous crime, stating that it was extremely distressing for her to be accused of something she did not do, especially considering she was a mother to 2 young daughters. The court hearing continued, with a focus on witness testimony that brought new aspects of the case to light. The prosecution questioned Karjan, targeting key points, Specifically, they asked her if she had suggested cremating her son Rolando. Karjan responded firmly that the decision wasn't hers to make, and she never made such a suggestion. Next, the prosecution called relatives of the deceased to testify, providing more details about what happened. Soledad Elias's mother took the stand, telling the court that after her son's death, Rolando told her that Karjan had suggested cremating Elias's body so that both families could keep the boy's ashes. However, Soledad rejected the idea. She also shared her memories of meeting Rolando at the cemetery, where he mentioned Karjan's jealousy. According to her, Karjan and Rolando's relationship was troubled to the point where they even slept in separate beds. Carolina, the mother of Rolando's first child, was another witness. She stated that her ex-husband Rolando and Karjan slept in separate rooms, although she had never interacted with Karjan before the incident. However, on the morning of February 8th, Karjan called Carolina to inform her that Rolando was ill and hospitalized. Karjan claimed that Rolando had probably taken some medication and was feeling unwell, and asked Carolina to help her unlock Rolando's cell phone, suspecting that he was seeing another woman. Carolina was shocked to hear about Rolando's condition, as they had met just a few days prior and he seemed fine. When she arrived at the hospital, Karjan was already there, talking to the doctors. Carolina was not allowed to enter, so she waited outside. As she was leaving, Karjan told her that everyone else had left, which made Carolina suspicious. She demanded an explanation from the doctors, who told her that Rolando had lost consciousness and was not responding to treatment. Carolina then complained to the hospital secretary and later spoke to Karjan, who claimed that Rolando had taken medication for skin blemishes, which caused an allergic reaction. According to Karjan, the medication bottle was no longer available because the housekeeper had thrown it away. The accumulation of these details only served to deepen the mystery surrounding this complex case. As the trial progressed, medical professionals and experts took the stand to present crucial forensic evidence, as well as the findings of a comprehensive psychological examination. This new evidence shed light on previously overlooked details that had gone unnoticed until then. Dr. Ivana Marinelli, a pediatrician at the hospital, recalled Elias's hospitalization in July 2019. At the time, Elias was rushed to the hospital with severe breathing problems and required immediate intubation. A CT scan revealed a severe blood clot in his brain. Elias received intensive care, and Dr. Marinelli confirmed that his symptoms matched those of ethylene glycol poisoning. These symptoms included impaired consciousness, restlessness, and eventually a coma, accompanied by a blood clotting disorder. Despite the medical team's best efforts, Elias's condition deteriorated, and at 5 p.m. on July 12th, he suffered cardiac and respiratory arrest. Medical personnel, including his father, attempted to resuscitate Elias for 50 minutes, but unfortunately, all efforts were in vain, and he was pronounced dead at 6 p.m. The jury reviewed the results of Karjan's psychological evaluation, which was conducted at the request of the prosecution. The experts' findings indicated that Karjan was dishonest and hid the truth, projecting an image of decency while actually being cold and cruel. Notably, a psychological examination was conducted shortly after her husband's death, but it revealed no emotional impact from the loss, raising questions about her sincerity and reinforcing her portrayal as a self-centered woman. The examiners also detected signs of hidden hostility and impulsive behaviors in Karjan. The prosecutor questioned Karjan's claim of being a victim of gender-based violence, as she had described in her testimony. This information collectively painted a detailed psychological portrait of the defendant. After weeks of tense anticipation and continuous court proceedings, the trial finally reached its conclusion. The packed courtroom was filled with people, their eyes fixed anxiously on the jury and the judge, awaiting the verdict that would bring justice to this complex and tragic case. The prosecutor asked the jury to convict Karjan, emphasizing that the evidence pointed to her as the mastermind and perpetrator of both murders. She bought ethylene glycol, got rid of the packaging, and made it look like regular juice. As a result, her loved ones suffered and died without her assistance. The prosecution and the plaintiff urged the jury to deliver a unanimous guilty verdict, insisting it was the only way to achieve justice. They wanted Karjan to be convicted of murder with evidence of extreme cruelty. In contrast, the defense argued that there wasn't enough evidence to prove their client's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. They claimed that a person's character, good or bad, doesn't necessarily determine their involvement in a crime, and that for their client, the deaths of Rolando and his son were a devastating tragedy. Despite the defense's arguments, Karjan joined the notorious ranks of Argentine criminals who poisoned their victims. After a lengthy silence and a tense wait for the verdict, the jury delivered their decision. In a unanimous verdict, they found Karjan guilty of murdering Elias and committing the crime with exceptional cruelty. Additionally, they convicted her of Rolando's aggravated death, which was caused by an insidious procedure. Karjan, dressed in black with white beads around her neck, remained expressionless as she heard the verdict. The jury's guilty verdict resulted in her receiving a life sentence in prison. Karjan, the defendant, attempted to evade punishment for the treacherous murders that shocked society and left many unanswered questions. Her plan to cremate the victims' bodies may have been her final attempt to avoid the punishment she deserved. Nevertheless, the court and jury remained unmoved by her tactics and delivered a just verdict. Why did Karjan kill her loved ones? This question remains unanswered, a mystery that continues to baffle. On the surface, she had everything one could ask for to be happy. Yet perhaps the root of her motive lay hidden in the recesses of her own soul, driven by jealousy, self-interest, or an inflated sense of pride. Despite the heinous nature of her crime, Karjan refused to acknowledge her guilt, leaving the true motives behind this dark act unclear. Now, as Canova faces a lengthy prison sentence, she will have ample time to reflect on the dark forces that may have consumed her, ultimately destroying not only her own life, but also those around her. This tragic tale serves as a poignant reminder that even in the closest of relationships, terrible secrets and mysteries can lurk beneath the surface, and that true love and loyalty must always be our guiding principles.